Whether worker shortages or a flood of available talent, the stakes are high when it comes to finding the right people for the job. It can be an expensive, time-consuming process to repeat if you make the wrong call. Hiring managers tend to favor people with relevant past experience, familiar or elite education or social backgrounds, even friends or former classmates. But being educated doesn't make you smart, and being smart does not make you competent. Competencies are what I was trained to assess as an executive recruiter at one of the world's largest executive search firms. One definition is that they are skills plus knowledge plus ability. My definition is that they are how you do something. You might have experience having done something, but you did it poorly. I'll show you how to learn what your competencies are, functional and leadership competencies, and I'll detail how to assess those of people you're considering hiring and assessing as part of a performance evaluation or promotion process. Hi, I'm Ginny Clarke, a conscious leadership expert who spent 2 decades in executive recruiting and talent management. Having worked with giants like Google, Spencer Stuart, I discovered that the secret to transformative leadership lies in the 5 dimensions of conscious leadership. And I'm here to help you unlock your full potential. Join me on this channel as we embark on an honest and vulnerable journey together to become the kind of leader that genuinely inspires organizational transformation. Now, I'm someone who has always had a wide range of interests. I wanted to be a veterinarian growing up, and I went to the University of California at Davis to study animal science because they had one of the only vet schools in the country. Once I got there, I discovered I didn't like it at all. I thought I might break a nail. And I switched to French and linguistics. After graduating, I worked for a couple of years as a recruiter for the university before deciding to go to business school, Kellogg. Once there, I focused on accounting and finance and went into banking and then commercial real estate and then executive search. It's not that I was fickle as much as I didn't know what I didn't know. My parents were educated, but not exposed to any of these careers. My mom was a physical therapist in healthcare. My father was with a state agency in corrections. He was a prison warden. What I instinctively learned that allowed me to position myself for these various careers, not just jobs, was to express my competencies even though I didn't necessarily have experience in the industry sector or function. Even though I had been a college recruiter, that didn't prepare me for executive level recruiting as much as the business development and strategic thinking competencies that I had developed in banking and real estate. I developed a narrative that expressed my knowledge of the role, the company, and the required competencies of the role, and I laid out how mine matched perfectly with what they were looking for. When I became a recruiter, I was able to convince clients who were hiring managers that some seemingly not so qualified candidates were indeed as qualified, if not more so, than those who had more experience, at least on paper, because these people I was recommending had competencies, especially leadership competencies that were needed for the job. So over the last 25 years since becoming an executive recruiter, I've watched companies over-index on Pedigree. Which schools, what were the grades, what were the companies, and using these as a predictor of one's success, only to find that the person in the role doesn't have what they need and are partially or totally incompetent. This lack of leadership competencies, things like problem solving, decision making, building inclusive teams, strategic thinking, these are the things that they needed. Having functional expertise like marketing, finance, engineering means that you're good and you're credible, but that's not enough when you're managing a team. I often quote Steve Jobs, who says, "I've come to realize that an intuitive understanding and consciousness is more significant than abstract thinking and intellectual logical analysis." Intuitive understanding and consciousness. So as far as I'm concerned, consciousness is the next frontier in the talent world. Hiring by pedigree is completely passé. This notion of hiring on the basis of competence means that you are getting people who are elevating their game and elevating the game of the organization, the level of performance, right? Now you've got folks that are interacting, you also have greater diversity, you've got greater levels of acceptance, and this is part of what expands the consciousness and the richness of an organization. This transcends what we refer to as culture. This to me is really pushing you to the next level of performance that only consciousness can offer. When hiring, promoting for a role, write the job description in the language of competencies as well as the experience, the task, and the responsibilities. And make sure that not just yourself, but everyone interviewing understands how to ask competency-based questions versus have you done it before. These questions involve asking people for examples of how they've done something or offering a hypothetical situation for them to address. And when positioning yourself for a new role, whether or not it's a different company, you want to offer proof points against the competencies on your resume that show that you indeed have them when you're applying or interviewing. And that narrative, again, is where you get to describe the demonstrated competencies along with who you are, how you think. These things become truly important. So with competencies, I'm often asked, how does one know what they are? And I think I tried to demonstrate and articulate how I found my own by moving to these different areas and somehow realizing that I had an instinctive sense and ability to do something that was part of what the job involved, even though it wasn't in the same kind of an organization. There are certain tools out there that will get you close. There are things like the predictive index, the strengths finders by Gallup, that has been around for a long time. These are things that you can buy for a nominal amount and take online. And what they do is they give you language that can help you begin to articulate how you do something, not just have you done this thing, right? But it's really breaking it down. And it's catered to you and based on some of the work that you've done. And then you can kind of line that up with your resume and say, yes, I actually do have some things that set me up to do something else that I hadn't necessarily considered. So leveraging competency-based assessment allows you to ensure you have a diverse pool of candidates, leading to a more diverse and talented workforce. It minimizes the tendency to hire your network, where you might have people from similar backgrounds to your own, but aren't necessarily the best employees. I've absolutely seen circumstances where maybe some initially doubtful hiring managers recognized that hiring on the basis of competency was the best thing for them, where they had been looking for a certain kind of person, or worse yet, they knew what they didn't want. And by expanding their thinking, I was able to influence and say, if you take this person who's coming from a completely different industry, given where the business is, this should be the perfect fit for you. And indeed, several times I've had hiring managers who did that, and the people that they hired went on to make enormous contributions and really fit in very, very well with little ramp-up time. It's a 2016 Gallup poll that found that only 18% of managers demonstrate a high level of talent for managing or leading others, meaning a shocking 82% aren't very good at leading people. This to me validates that we have not been hiring and promoting people into leadership positions who have true leadership competencies. And we are compromising the performance of the company and limiting the quality of our employees and their growth as a result. You've heard of Pascal's principle that says that water seeks its own level? Yeah. Well, there's such an ugly downside, and I think we're actually seeing it, but we're not acknowledging it when you're not doing competency-based assessment, because you're so reliant and you've created this system that you're trying to lead everybody to believe is a meritocracy when it's not. Because you've been hiring your friends, or you've been hiring people based on knowing them or having worked with them elsewhere, you're not getting the most important elements of and capabilities that you need for the job. And it fosters a lot of distrust and resentment that contributes to a toxic culture. If I'm standing there and I'm saying, I've had all of these credentials that you seem to value, and yet you compromise when it comes to someone who doesn't look like me. There's the bias and the favoritism runs rampant, and you can't contradict yourself and say you have a meritocracy when you're not behaving in that way, when indeed you are compromising on quality. And I'll go back to that statistic, that Gallup quote that says that only 18% of leaders are considered good. There's a trickle-down effect to that. you don't necessarily have the best, most high quality people you think you have. I've got a great resource for you. It's a little self-serving, but you might know that I have a podcast called Fifth Dimensional Leadership, and I would love it if you would listen to Building Your Career Narrative. There are two of them, parts 1 and part 2, and we will put a link in at the end of this video for you to find that podcast episode. It's going to help you tremendously as you build that narrative in support of your competencies. I know firsthand how taking that first step can be the catalyst for a life-changing transformation. I remember the moment I decided to harness my own strengths, and it made all the difference in my career. And that's why I've created a career mapping tool just for you to help you uncover your unique competencies and leverage them to design your own career map. Take the first step towards your next level by clicking the link in the video description, and let's start this incredible journey together.